Every person alive today exists because one day someone refused to stop walking. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the land that kept your family alive for generations can no longer keep you alive. The water is disappearing. The herds are moving farther away. Each day finding food takes longer, and each night someone grows weaker. Stay and slowly starve. Leave and walk into a world no human you know has ever seen. No roads, no maps, no idea what waits beyond the horizon, only the hope that somewhere life still exists. So humans moved. Days became months, journeys became generations. And without knowing it, small groups of desperate survivors began spreading farther than any human had gone before. Across burning lands, into brutal cold, beyond mountains and seas, until somehow, humans were everywhere. But why? What happened to our world that forced our ancestors to keep moving until they reached almost every corner of the earth? The answer became the greatest journey in human history. For hundreds of thousands of years, Africa was our world. Across its grasslands, forests, lakes, and coastlines, small groups of humans learned how to survive in wildly different environments. They followed animals, gathered wild plants, searched for water, and passed the knowledge of the land from one generation to the next. Life was dangerous, but this was the world they knew. Then, over thousands of years, the world began to shift. Rains changed, lakes expanded, then disappeared. Green landscapes dried, while other regions suddenly became rich with water and life. Animals changed their routes, and humans moved with them. Sometimes the changing climate brought hunger and danger, but at other times, it did something extraordinary. Lands that had once been almost impossible to cross became greener. Water appeared along ancient routes. New paths opened beyond the world humans had known. No one standing there could have understood what it meant. They weren't planning to populate the earth. They weren't searching for new continents. They were following water, following animals, following the possibility of another day. And slowly, almost without realizing it, some of them began walking out of Africa. The greatest journey in human history had already begun. Leaving Africa did not happen in a single moment. There was no great migration where thousands of humans marched into the unknown together. Small groups moved slowly, following water, animals, and lands where survival seemed possible. Some journeys failed. People turned back. Other groups disappeared, leaving little or no trace in the ancestry of people alive today. But some kept moving. Generation after generation, they entered lands their ancestors had never known. The air grew colder. Familiar animals vanished. New predators appeared. Plants they once depended on could no longer be found. Every new landscape demanded a new way to survive. There were no maps telling them where water waited, no stories warning them what lay beyond the mountains. A wrong direction could mean starvation. A brutal winter could erase an entire group. Yet somehow, some survived. They learned. They adapted. They kept moving. But as our ancestors pushed farther into unfamiliar lands, they began finding strange signs, footprints, broken stone tools, the remains of fires they had not made. Somewhere beyond the darkness, someone else was already there. Our ancestors had crossed into a new world believing they were alone. They were about to discover something extraordinary. They were not the only humans on Earth. The signs grew harder to ignore. Smoke rising beyond distant hills, fresh footprints pressed into the earth, fires still warm, but no one nearby. And as our ancestors moved deeper into these unfamiliar lands, they finally encountered the people who had left those signs behind. Human faces, human hands, but bodies shorter, broader, and more heavily built than their own. These strangers already knew this frozen world. They knew where animals moved. They knew how to survive the cold. And they had been here long before our ancestors arrived. They were Neanderthals, What happened during those ancient encounters has been lost to time. Perhaps some groups kept their distance, perhaps others fought, perhaps curiosity slowly defeated fear. We may never know, but thousands of years later, their blood revealed the secret. The two groups did more than meet. They had children together. Their DNA crossed into our ancestors and never completely disappeared. Even today, traces of those ancient encounters survive in many living people. Our ancestors had walked into the unknown searching for food and safety. Instead, they found something no one expected: other humans. And for the first time in our story, humans found each other. For generations, our ancestors had survived by doing one simple thing. When life disappeared, they kept walking. But as some groups moved farther through unfamiliar lands, they began reaching barriers they could not simply cross on foot. The land ended. Beyond it was open water. Sometimes another island may have broken the horizon. Other times, there may have been nothing ahead but sea. To continue meant leaving the one thing humans had always trusted beneath their feet. Solid ground. No one knows exactly what their vessels looked like or who first decided the journey was worth the risk. We don't know how many attempts failed. We don't know how many people vanished into the water. But the evidence tells us that humans crossed. Small groups somehow left the shore and entered a world where they could not live, could not drink the water around them, and might not know exactly what waited ahead. And one crossing was not enough. Over generations, humans moved across multiple stretches of sea, from island to island, pushing farther toward lands beyond. Somehow, they made it. Our ancestors had spent thousands of years walking across the world. Then the land ended, and they kept going. Then our ancestors entered a world unlike anything they had known before. The cold was brutal. Winters lasted longer. Food became harder to find, and the animals people depended on wandered across enormous open lands, so humans followed. They covered themselves with animal skins, protected their fires, and learned to survive in places where a single freezing night could be deadly. But while humans struggled against the cold, the frozen world itself was changing. So much water was locked away in ice that the sea pulled back, revealing a vast land in the far north where ocean exists today. Animals moved across it, and slowly, humans moved with them. They weren't searching for a new continent. They had no idea what waited ahead. They followed tracks, hunted, raised children, and moved whenever survival demanded it. One generation walked farther than the last, then another, until people who had begun their journey in Asia were living in a world their distant ancestors had never seen, the Americas. And from there, humans spread across enormous landscapes, adapting to deserts, forests, mountains, and cold. Thousands of years of movement had carried our ancestors farther than anyone could have imagined. They had not set out to find the world, but step by step, they were filling it. For thousands of years, survival had meant movement. When food disappeared, people moved. When water became harder to find, they searched elsewhere. But eventually, in different parts of the world, some groups began staying longer in the same places. They learned the land more deeply. They protected useful plants, gathered seeds, and slowly discovered how to produce more food where they lived. Some animals were brought closer and managed instead of endlessly followed. It did not happen everywhere, and it did not happen all at once. Many humans continued moving, but for others, something had changed. Camps became settlements. Settlements grew. More people began sharing the same land, depending on the same harvests and the same sources of water. For the first time, leaving became harder. A bad season no longer meant simply following the herd somewhere else. Homes had been built, food had been stored. Entire communities now depended on one place. Humans had spent thousands of years changing to survive the world. Now, they were beginning to change the world itself. but the world was not finished changing them. The change did not come overnight. Slowly, generation after generation, the rains became less reliable. Across North Africa, lakes that had once supported life began to shrink. Grasslands faded, animals moved in search of water, and the people who depended on them faced a familiar choice. But now, for some communities, leaving meant abandoning more than a temporary camp. Settlements had grown, herds had been raised, generations had learned the same land, and slowly, that land stopped giving them what they needed. So people began moving again. Families and communities followed the remaining water, gathering wherever life could still survive. Some found oases, others moved toward rivers. And in the east, the Nile became increasingly important to people, searching for reliable water and fertile land. Along its banks, more communities lived closer together, sharing the same narrow ribbon of life, surrounded by an expanding dry world. Humans had spent thousands of years spreading across the earth. Now, the changing world was beginning to pull them back together. By now, humans had changed almost everything. We built cities where forests and grasslands once stood. We raised walls around them and placed kings behind those walls. We created armies, borders, and empires powerful enough to make people believe they had finally mastered the world around them. Then the sky stopped giving. In Mesopotamia, severe drought struck as the Akkadian Empire weakened. Fields struggled, settlements emptied, people moved. Thousands of years passed. Across the Maya world, repeated droughts came during years already scarred by warfare and political crisis. Reservoirs fell, crops suffered, great cities began losing the people who had once filled them. People moved again. Then, far to the north, Norse settlers who had survived in Greenland for centuries faced a colder, changing world alongside growing economic and social pressures. Their settlements faded, and eventually, they were gone. One empire, another civilization, another distant shore, different names, different centuries. The footsteps were the same. Humans could raise walls, crown kings, draw borders across the earth and call the land ours. But when the world changed, those lines could not make rain fall. They could not fill an empty field. They could not force the land to keep us alive. So people moved. They always had. And even after thousands of years, humanity was still walking.